After putting my whole life into my son, I arrived at his meticulously manicured suburban home, expecting a warm embrace. Instead, a cold reality hit me. My new room, as they called it, was an old, dusty, forgotten barn in the backyard. The humiliation washed over me, a stark contrast to the life I had built for him. They thought they had broken me, reduced me to an inconvenience to be hidden away. But they were wrong. They didn't know I carried stories. Stories of resilience, of love, of a life far richer than they could ever imagine. Sometimes, family can hurt you the most. But what happens when you decide enough is enough? My journey is just beginning, and it's going to be a tough one. If this sounds like something you understand, please hit like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell me what you think in the comments. I remember that drive like it was yesterday. Miles of excitement, building up to seeing my boy, Randall, again. My heart beat a little faster as the cab pulled up in front of his neat, two-story house. It looked expensive, all brick and manicured lawns, a picture-perfect suburban dream. After selling my own home, the one Harold and I had built our lives in for 40 years, I was coming to stay with my only son, hoping for warmth for family. But what waited for me wasn't a cozy room inside. It was something else entirely. The cab driver helped me with my 2 suitcases, the last tangible pieces of my old life. Randall was still at work, so his wife, Heather, answered the door. She was slender, impeccably put together, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Margaret, you've made it at last," she said, a little too brightly, her perfume expensive and a bit overwhelming. She helped me with one small suitcase, leaving the heavier one by the door, saying Randall would get it later. The hallway inside was spacious, gleaming with polished wood, adorned with fancy mirrors and stylish furniture. Everything spoke of wealth and good taste, and I, in my old travel suit and comfortable shoes, felt instantly out of place. "You have a lovely home," I offered, trying to make conversation. Heather nodded, a fleeting smile on her thin lips. "We just remodeled. Come on, I'll show you where you'll live." I expected her to lead me upstairs, where the bedrooms surely were. But instead, we walked through the bright, modern kitchen and out the back door into the yard. "I'm afraid we don't have a spare room in the house itself," Heather explained, her voice even, almost apologetic. "Randall uses the second bedroom as his home office, and the guest room in the third is being renovated." My stomach clenched, but I didn't say a word. We crossed the neat backyard towards a small structure at the far corner of the property. It was an old barn, painted to match the house, trying to blend in. Heather unlocked the door. "We remodeled it last summer," she said, pushing it open. "We wanted to make a studio for guests, but we never quite finished it." The inside was clean and dry, but cramped. There was a single, narrow bed, a tiny table and chair, a flimsy closet, and a minuscule bathroom. Heather pointed to an old radiator. "There's a heater here, and Wi-Fi, though the signal's a little weak sometimes." She glanced at my face, probably seeing my disbelief. "It's temporary, of course, until we can think of something better. Make yourself comfortable. Randall will be home around 6. And then she left, leaving me standing there with my suitcase in a barn. After the spacious house I'd lived in for nearly 40 years, this was humiliating. It felt like being put in a kennel, like an old, unwanted dog. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I was 75 years old, too old to cry. This wasn't the warm welcome I'd imagined, not by a long shot. That first evening, as dusk settled over the backyard, I waited. I kept hoping the real welcome, the one from my son, Randall, would still come. But sometimes, hope is just a whisper in the wind. I sat on the hard, creaky bed in the barn, trying to make sense of my new surroundings. It felt less like a temporary stay and more like an exile. I slowly unpacked the few things I had left: a couple of dresses, a suit, and Harold's framed picture. His kind, shrewd eyes looked out at me from the photo, a silent question in their depths. Harold was always the steady one, the sensible accountant. He wouldn't have understood this. 2 hours later, I heard a car door slam. Randall's tall figure flashed past the barn window, walking slowly towards me, like someone bracing for an unpleasant chore. He stepped in without knocking, his business suit rumpled, his tie off to the side. He looked tired, older than I remembered, with new lines around his eyes and gray in his dark hair. "Mom," he said, not a question, not an embrace. "You made it," I just nodded. He asked about the trip, then glanced around the tiny barn. "Heather showed you your room?" he asked, almost circling the space. "Yes," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "It's very cozy." He frowned, as if my forced cheerfulness made him uncomfortable. "It's only temporary, Mom," he rushed to say, "until we finish repairs on the guest room. Leaky pipe, you know, had to replace the floor and walls." I nodded again, though I hadn't seen any signs of renovation or building materials in the main house. "Dinner will be ready in half an hour," he said, shuffling his feet. "Heather made lasagna." He seemed eager to get back to the house to escape the awkwardness. "Sounds wonderful," I replied. I'll see you there." He nodded, quickly walking out and closing the barn door behind him. I let out a long breath. The first meeting had gone worse than I'd expected. It felt like there was a wall between us, just like there always had been, only now it was thicker, colder. All those years I'd imagined our reunion, the hugs, the missed conversations. Foolish dreams of an old woman. At the main house, Heather greeted me with a practiced smile. Randall sat at the bar with a whiskey. The living room was large, filled with expensive, impersonal furniture, like something out of a catalog, not a home. The dining room, too, was formal, only used for special occasions. My abstract painting comment, a small attempt to connect about decor, was met with Randall's proud assertion that Heather had good taste. Over dinner, Heather served lasagna that was too spicy for my taste. We exchanged polite banalities about the weather, Randall's work, my trip. We carefully avoided the past, as if by unspoken agreement. Then, as we finished dessert, a store-bought apple pie, Randall finally brought it up. "How's the house sale going, Mom?" he asked too casually. "I already sold it," I replied, 2 weeks ago. "You did?" He perked up, a spark in his eyes. "Did you get a good price?" Heather shot him a warning glance. "Enough," I said evasively. "I've paid off my debts and have a little left over to live on." "So you're not short of money then?" Randall pressed, ignoring Heather's disgruntled look. He kept asking how much, insisting it was just to know I was secure. I told him the amount, a decent sum for a modest house in Pittsburgh. His eyes gleamed, and Heather gave a subtle nod. "Where do you keep that money?" He asked, almost too casually. I remembered Harold's wisdom. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. I told Randall some was in the bank, some in investments. Heather then subtly brought up a car loan payment due, and Randall's face darkened. They exchanged glances. It struck me then, their lavish lifestyle and this sudden interest in my finances. As the night grew quiet, listening to the crickets outside my barn window, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about a leaky pipe or a lack of space. It was about something else entirely. Something cold and calculated, slowly revealing itself. That night, sleeping in the barn, the cold outside seemed to match the chill in my heart. The questions spun in my head, but the answers were slowly, painfully becoming clear. My son, the boy I'd sacrificed so much for, seemed to see me less as a mother and more as a solution to his problems. The next morning, I skipped breakfast at the house, choosing tea and a book I'd brought from Pittsburgh instead. Around noon, Heather popped into the barn, dressed impeccably for an outing. "Margaret, Randall, and I are going to a barbecue at a friend's house. Would you mind being alone until tonight?" she asked, a hint of impatience in her polite tone. I assured her it was fine. As she left, she paused. "Did Randall talk to you yesterday about our situation? What did you decide?" I could hear the eagerness in her voice. "I'm still thinking, Heather," I replied calmly. "30,000 is no small thing to me." She gave a strained smile, reminding me that if her mother-in-law were in a bind, she wouldn't hesitate. "Of course you wouldn't," I thought. "You'd probably see it as an investment." Once they were gone, the house was empty, and I took the chance to look around, something I felt embarrassed doing but needed to. I found unpaid bills scattered on a living room table, utilities, credit cards, even health insurance. The amounts were worrying, but not catastrophic. Then, in a sideboard drawer, I found Randall's car paperwork, a brand new, expensive BMW. The car alone was worth half my old home. In Randall's home office, bank statements casually tossed on his desk showed negative balances. Yet, they had spent money on fancy restaurants, designer clothes, and even a vacation in the Bahamas just 3 months ago. It was clear. Their problems weren't just bad investments. They simply couldn't live within their means. Back in the barn, I wrestled with what to do. On one hand, he was my son. On the other, I'd seen how they handled their money. 30,000 would likely vanish in months, and they'd be back asking for more. By evening, I had made a decision. I wouldn't give them everything, but I'd give them enough to show goodwill, to help with the most urgent bills. Just 10,000. Enough to help, but not enough to let them keep living large. This wasn't about weakness. It was about laying my own trap, testing the waters. Randall and Heather returned late that night, laughing loudly with guests. The music and chatter carried on until well past midnight. The next morning, I knocked on the house door around 10. Heather, looking tired after the party, answered. "I wanted to talk about money," I said bluntly. Her eyes immediately brightened. "Of course, come in." We sat at the kitchen table. "I've been thinking about your request," I began, "and I thought I could help. Not with $30,000, but with $10,000. Heather's face flickered with disappointment, but she quickly recovered. "That's very generous of you, Margaret. We're very grateful." I wrote the check, feeling a pang of regret, not about the money, but about how our relationship had come to this. "I hope this will help you with your most urgent problems," I said. "Absolutely," she replied, neatly folding the check and tucking it away. I knew this was just the beginning. Over the next few days, their caring game was almost laughable. Heather would drop by with a cup of tea, asking how I'd slept. Randall even fixed a leaky faucet in the barn bathroom and brought in a new heater, old, but better than nothing. They treated me like a hen laying golden eggs, and I knew another request, a bigger one, wouldn't be far off. The game of caring didn't last long. I could see their patience thinning, and their true intentions, like a bad smell, were getting harder to ignore. The next demand came quicker than I expected. A week after I handed over that $10,000 check, Randall invited me to dinner at the house. Heather had supposedly cooked my favorite roast, though I knew she couldn't possibly have known what that was. Over dessert, Randall cleared his throat and exchanged a look with Heather. "Mom," he began, "your help has been invaluable, really. We were able to pay off the most urgent debts." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, wary. But he sighed. "That was just the tip of the iceberg. We're still having problems with the mortgage. The bank is threatening to repossess the house if we don't make the late payments." "How much do you need this time?" I asked bluntly. Randall looked embarrassed by my directness. 25,000 more, he said. That would cover everything and give us a few months' breathing room. I just stayed silent, pretending to think, but inside, I knew this was the beginning of an endless spiral. 25,000 today, 50 tomorrow, and soon all my savings would be gone. That night, unable to sleep, I heard voices outside my barn window. Randall and Heather were on the back porch, sipping drinks, their voices carrying clearly in the quiet spring air. They thought I couldn't hear them. "Do you think she'll give more?" Heather asked. "She should," Randall said confidently. "She's my mother. Besides, where would she go?" "I don't know, she didn't seem too convinced," Heather muttered. "It's a tactic," Randall chuckled. "She just wants us to ask. Old people like to feel needed." The words hit me like a physical blow. Old people needed. I wasn't their mother, I was an ATM machine. "What if she says no?" Heather pressed. "Then I'll have to push harder," Randall replied, taking a sip from his glass. "Hint that if she doesn't help, she might be looking for another place to live. She's not going anywhere. She's got no one but us. Besides, I'm the only heir. Sooner or later, all that money will be ours anyway." Heather laughed. "Sooner rather than later. She doesn't look well. I bet the old woman won't last long in that barn, will she?" Their laughter, cold and mocking, sent an icy wave through me. So that was their plan. Squeeze all the money out of me, then wait for me to die. And they wanted a power of attorney to have full access to my accounts, for my own good, of course. The rage that surged through me was cold, clear. Everything clicked into place. I wasn't a mother to them, not a person, just a means to solve their financial problems. They didn't just not love me, they despised me, laughed behind my back, wished for my imminent death. Well, if they wanted to play that game, I could play it too, only by my own rules. The next morning, I waited until Randall left for work and Heather went to the gym. Then I called a cab. My first stop was the bank, where I closed my account and took out all my jewelry from the safe deposit box. Next, I visited a lawyer. I told him I wanted to draw up a new will, leaving everything not to Randall, but to 2 charities. One for the elderly, one for victims of domestic violence. Afterward, I went straight to Sunset Gardens, an independent living complex for seniors, and put down a deposit on a cozy studio apartment. It was a real home, worthy of a person, not a shed in a backyard. Back at Randall's house, I started packing my 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. I was just closing the second suitcase when the barn door opened. Randall and Heather stood in the doorway, their faces contorted with fury. They must have somehow found out. "What's going on?" Randall demanded, looking at my packed bags. "Are you going somewhere?" I straightened up and looked him straight in the eye. "Yes, Randall, I'm moving." "Where?" Heather intervened, her voice shrill. "You don't have another place to live." "I do now," I replied calmly. "I've rented an apartment in Sunset Gardens." Randall's face went pale. "That expensive retirement complex. Where did you get the money for?" His gaze fell on my purse, where the edge of a velvet pouch peeked out. "What's this?" He snatched it, dumping out my mother's pearls, gold earrings, and amethyst brooch into his palm. "Where did this come from? You said you had no valuables." "I don't have to account for my possessions to you," I said firmly. "Now give me my things back." "Give it back," Randall laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. After you lied to us. After you hid your riches while we were barely making ends meet. Riches, I grinned bitterly. That jewelry is worth a few thousand at most. And they belong to my mother. It's a family heirloom, Randall exclaimed. They should stay in the family. Family, I repeated, my voice rising. Where was family when you put me in this barn? Where was family when you were discussing how to swindle me out of all my money? Where was family when you said the old woman wouldn't last long? Randall turned even paler. Were you eavesdropping? There's no need to eavesdrop, I countered, when you're yelling across the yard after a few glasses of wine. Heather stepped forward, her face contorted with anger. You can't just leave, Margaret. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go. And I'm grateful for that, I said, a cold smile on my lips. So grateful that I gave you $25,000 for 3 weeks in this barn. I thought that was more than generous. Randall clenched his fist, still holding my jewelry. You changed your will, didn't you? He hissed. Disinherited me. I didn't answer, but my face must have betrayed the truth. How could you do such a thing? He shouted, throwing my jewelry onto the floor. I am your son, your only child. The son who only sees his mother as a purse, I replied calmly, bending to pick up my scattered treasures. The son who put me in a barn and waited for me to die so he could inherit. That's not true, Heather shrieked. We took care of you. You took care of my money, I corrected, straightening up. And that's all you cared about. Randall grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. You can't just walk away. Not after everything we've done for you. I yanked my arm free, looking my son in the eye. I can, Randall, and I'm leaving. I'll have a cab pick me up tomorrow morning and you'll never see me again. How could you do that? He shouted again, desperation in his voice. Disinherit me, hide the jewelry, leave without warning. I only smiled as I looked at their anger-distorted faces. The night after the showdown was long, full of restless anticipation. I barely slept, half listening for any rustle or angry voices behind the thin barn door. It wasn't fear of Randall. Even when angry, he wasn't capable of physical violence. It was the dread that they might try to prevent me from leaving, hide my things, or mess with my documents. But the night passed smoothly. When the morning light finally crept into that barn, it felt different. It felt like a start. At 5 a.m., I was already on my feet, ready for a new day and a new life. The cab was due at 8, and I'd purposely ordered it early. Randall needed to see me leave, needed to hear everything I wanted to say. All those years of unspoken words, all those decades of repressed resentment and pretense, they were over. I carefully made my bed, a small habit from a life I was leaving behind, even though I knew I wasn't coming back here. I packed the last few things into my suitcase, checked my documents one last time, passport, bank card, insurance, the lease for my new apartment. Everything was in place. At 7:30, I heard movement in the main house. A door slammed, the shower rumbled. They were awake. I sat on the bed and waited, watching the second hand on my clock tick down the last minutes of my stay in a place that had never truly been and could never be home. Exactly at 8:00, the cab pulled up. I heard the engine, then the driver's footsteps heading to the main house. The doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw Randall buttoning his shirt as he went to open the door. Heather was in the kitchen, her silhouette visible through the glass. I grabbed my suitcase and bag, took one last look around the barn, and walked out into the crisp, clear morning. Birds chirped in the bushes, as if greeting my new day. Mom. Randall stood on the porch, a mix of surprise and worry on his face. "Are you really leaving?" "Yes, Randall," I answered firmly. The cab was waiting. Heather walked out, fixing her hair as she went. She saw my suitcases in the cab by the gate and stopped dead, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. "Margaret, you can't just leave," she began. "We need to talk, to discuss yesterday." "I think I was very clear about yesterday," I said, heading for the gate. Randall blocked my path. "Mom, please, let's talk," he pleaded, concern in his voice. "I was wrong yesterday. I said too much. We can discuss everything calmly, like adults." "I'm afraid the time for calm discussions is over, Randall." I looked him straight in the eye. "Please, let me go." "No," he crossed his arms over his chest. "Not until you explain what's going on. What did you do yesterday? Where did you transfer the money? What did you say to the lawyer?" I sighed. "Okay, Randall, here's what I did. I closed the Wells Fargo account and moved all the money to another bank. I changed my will so that my heirs are now two charities, not you. I took the family jewelry out of the safety deposit box, and I rented an apartment in Sunset Gardens, where I'm headed now." Randall's face paled. He hadn't expected such blunt honesty. You can't disinherit me," he blurted out. "I am your son, your only child. I can, Randall, and I did. But why?" His voice trembled. "What did I do? What did you do?" I grinned bitterly. "You put me in the barn like a useless thing. You manipulated me to get my money. You discussed with your wife how I wouldn't last long. You tried to get me to sign a power of attorney to get all my savings. And you're still asking me what you did." Heather stepped closer, her face panicking. "Margaret, you've got it all wrong. We really wanted to help you with your financial management. At your age, it can be difficult." "Spare me the hypocritical explanations, Heather," I cut her off. "I understood perfectly well. I was just a means of solving your financial problems, a source of money, nothing more." "That's not true." Randall exclaimed. "You're my mother, I care about you, you do." I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "Is that what caring looks like to you?" "You know, Randall, for years I blamed myself for our bad relationship. I thought I was too strict a mother, that I demanded too much of you. But now I see that I'm not the problem. The problem is you, your selfishness and callousness." Randall looked as if I'd hit him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Heather intervened. "Margaret, we recognize that the barn isn't the best place to live. We can convert the guest room for you, or even give up our bedroom and move downstairs. Do you really think this is about comfort? Where I'm going to sleep?" I looked at her in disbelief. "It's not about that, Heather. It's about attitude. The way you've treated me from the beginning." "We can fix this," Randall said quickly. "Give us a chance, Mom. Come back and we'll show you how much we really care about you." There was desperation in his voice, but I saw the truth in his eyes, not remorse but fear. Fear of losing access to my money, to the inheritance he was counting on. "No, Randall, it's too late for a second chance. I've already made my decision." I tried to go around him, but he blocked my path again. "You can't just walk away." He sounded angry now. "I won't let you." "Randall," my voice grew harsher. "If you don't let me go now, I'm calling the police." "Do you really want to bring it to that?" It worked. He took a step back, his face contorted in a grimace of impotent rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "When you're alone in your expensive apartment with no family, no support." "I'd rather be alone than with a family like that," I replied calmly and walked toward the gate. The cab driver, an old man with a gray mustache, was already waiting for me. He took my suitcase and opened the car door. "Wait." Heather shouted, running up to me. "Margaret, you can't do this to us. We were counting on your money. We have debts." Loans, my money is my money, Heather, I said firmly. Not yours, not Randall's, it's mine, and I will use it as I see fit. But we're family, she was almost shouting. A family is supposed to help each other. Family is as much about getting help as it is about giving it, I replied. Have you ever thought about the fact that I'm a human being too? That I have feelings, desires, needs? No, to you I was just a source of money, and now that it's gone, you're panicking. Randall came closer, his face contorted with anger. You're just getting back at me, aren't you? For not being the perfect son, for not calling often enough, for not coming over for the holidays. No, Randall, I shook my head. I'm not taking revenge. I'm just finally starting to live for myself. And I'm protecting what's mine. You're selfish, he spat out. You've always been selfish. All you ever think about is yourself, I grinned bitterly. It's funny coming from you. All my life I've lived for others, for your father, for you. Working 2 jobs so you could go to a good school. Denied myself everything so you could have the best. And this is how you repaid me for it. You were a terrible mother, shouted Randall, losing control. Always criticizing. Always demanding more, never satisfied. I wanted you to be a good man, Randall, I said quietly. God knows I tried, but I guess I failed. The words seemed to strike a chord with him. He turned pale and took a step back. You have no right to judge me, he hissed. You have no idea what I've been through. Do you have the right to judge me? I asked. Have you ever thought for a minute what I've been through? How it feels to be widowed after 40 years of marriage? To sell a house full of memories? To move in with a son who puts you in a barn and sees you only as a purse on legs? For a moment, something flashed in his eyes, shame maybe, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a cold determination. If you leave now, he said quietly, you may never come back. Never. I'll cut you out of my life. You cut me out of your life a long time ago, Randall, I replied calmly. You just didn't bother to tell me. I got into the cab and closed the door. The last thing I saw was the frozen figures of Randall and Heather in the driveway. They stood there like statues, staring after the car that drove away their hopes of easy money. The cab ride felt different. Not just a journey to a new address, but a journey back to myself. Leaving them behind wasn't an end, it was the real beginning. I watched the city wake up through the window, people hurrying to work, mothers taking children to school, old folks walking their dogs. Life went on, ordinary and unyielding, and somewhere in the midst of it all, I would now just be me. Not an appendix to my son, not a powerless old woman in a barn, but an independent person with my own life. We pulled into Sunset Gardens. It looked even better in the morning light, neat buildings nestled in greenery, well-kept walkways, people sitting on benches. It exuded a tranquility and dignity that had been sorely missing from my son's home. Gloria, the manager, met me at the entrance, all smiles and warmth. My new apartment was bright and cozy, a real home with a living room, a bedroom, and a small kitchen. The balcony overlooked a park where kids were already playing ball. Left alone, I sat on the couch, taking a deep breath. A strange mix of relief, sadness, and uncertainty washed over me. I had done it. I had cut ties with that toxic part of my life, protected my finances, and found a new place. But what came next? I started unpacking, arranging my few cherished photos, hanging clothes in the closet. When I placed Harold's picture on the bedside table, I realized, paradoxically, I didn't feel lonely. I had just severed my relationship with my only close relative, yet I felt not isolation, but freedom. Around noon, my cell phone rang, Randall's number. I hesitated, then put the phone aside. The talking could wait. Right now, I needed time for myself. Days folded into weeks, weeks into months. Life at Sunset Gardens took on a new rhythm. I rediscovered parts of myself I thought were long gone. Doris, a friendly neighbor, told me about a beginner's drawing class at a community center. I used to love to paint, a lifetime ago before Randall, before the routine of work and chores swallowed all my time. Eleanor, a new friend I'd met, nudged me. It's never too late to try something new or go back to the old. She was right. After all, I'd already been through the worst. The fear of a blank canvas seemed ridiculous. I signed up. The first picture I painted was terrible, crooked lines, faded colors. But Michael, the kind teacher, saw something in it. "You have a sense of composition," he said, "and you're not afraid of color." For the first time in a long time, I felt alive, not just existing, but truly alive with desires, aspirations, joys. Beyond painting, I joined a book club, attended classical music concerts, even tried elderly yoga. I was Margaret Brooks again, an individual with my own interests, opinions. One morning, checking the mail, I found a postcard with a view of Seattle. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the name at the bottom made my breath catch. Randall. "Mom, I moved to Seattle. Found a job with a construction company, not as prestigious as before, but stable. Heather didn't come with me, so we broke up. I'm not apologizing or asking for money. I just wanted you to know that I'm alive and trying to start over." I reread it several times. Not joy, not pride, but relief. Maybe my son was finally starting to grow up. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because everything had been said between us. We both needed time and space. On my 76th birthday, I invited some friends from Sunset Gardens for a small dinner at my apartment. Eleanor helped with the cooking, and Arthur, a former musician, played beautiful tunes. We drank wine, remembered our youth, laughed at old jokes. Later, I stepped out onto the balcony with a glass of wine. The night sky was studded with stars. The air smelled of jasmine from the neighbor's garden. I thought about the past year, all the changes. The barn, Randall's attempts to bleed me dry, my decision to leave. Was it easy? No. Was it right? Absolutely. I raised my glass to the starry sky, a toast to new beginnings. To freedom, I whispered, "Here's to a life that goes on no matter what." And in that moment, standing on the balcony of my small, cozy apartment, surrounded by the warmth of new friends and the freedom of my own decisions, I realized one simple truth. It's never too late to start living for yourself. It's never too late to free yourself from toxic relationships, from manipulation, from other people's expectations. Even at 75 years old. Especially at 75, when every day becomes especially precious. Margaret found her peace, not in a grand house, but within herself, after facing the ultimate betrayal. Her story is a powerful reminder. It's never too late to live on your own terms, to find your own strength. Does her journey resonate with you? Have you faced similar family challenges or found your own path to peace? Share your thoughts and support in the comments below. And if her story touched your heart, please give this video a like, subscribe for more inspiring journeys, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.